Well, joining us now is the Conservative House Leader Andrew Scheer and the NDP House Leader Peter Julian. Hello to both of you.
Good to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Mr. Scheer, you know, we heard the government House Leader today. She has asked members to refrain from politicizing what has happened here. It was the Speaker who invited the Ukrainian veteran. Mr. Rota has since apologized. But you and the Conservatives say that the Prime Minister also needs to accept responsibility. Are you politicizing this gaffe by putting this at the Prime Minister's feet?
You know, Liberals always say that when you criticize their leader, you're politicizing something. Justin Trudeau politicized this by not coming clean and accepting his government's role in providing background checks for state visits. The duty of care, so to speak, on making sure that President Zelenskyy's visit was a success, not just from a security point of view, but from a diplomatic point of view as well, rests with the government. Every party had to submit names to the protocol office for background checks and for vetting. The government House Leader herself acknowledged that vetting was done. It just, nobody seems to have told anybody about what happened in the background check. So our position is that, well, the Speaker may have the ability to invite members, just like all members of the House of Commons, invite guests, just like all members of the House of Commons might. It's the government's role and responsibility to provide that background check and that screening process. There's a reporting mechanism for the House of Commons Security that reports directly to the RCMP, which answers to the Minister of Public Safety and the Prime Minister ultimately. So there's a very clear chain of command, and it rests with the Prime Minister's office. Justin Trudeau has to take responsibility.
But isn't it reasonable to say that if the Speaker, who watches out for the safety of the House and all members, if it is the Speaker that's inviting somebody, isn't it reasonable to say that we trusted his judgment and his vetting process?
What the government is saying is that they invited the President of Ukraine, a country that's in the fight of its life against an illegal invader in the form of Russia, who is using false narratives to justify their unlawful attacks. And what the government is saying is that they left the guest list to chance, that they weren't going to go through it.
Well, they didn't leave it to chance. They left it to the Speaker.
No.
They left it to a trusted member of the House. He's the Speaker.
There is no capacity in the House of Commons to do the types of checks that CSIS or the RCMP do. That's why the government took control of the House of Commons security forces in the first place. The onus is on the government. When the government invites a foreign leader like President Zelenskyy, they highly script it. The itinerary goes through a whole bunch of checks. Anybody who's being introduced to the Prime Minister or to the President would go through all kinds of checks. And for the government to say, yeah, well, we just have this big blind spot on who might come to the House of Commons itself, that's not acceptable. The duty of care to make sure that this was a successful event from a security and from a diplomatic standpoint rests with the government. They need to take accountability. Justin Trudeau needs to take responsibility for his inaction on this.
Mr. Julian, what do you say to that? Does the Prime Minister need to accept more responsibility for Mr. Hunka's presence in the House?
Well, I rose in the House earlier today to call on Speaker Rota to resign. And the reasons are multiple. First, and Mr. Scheer knows this from his years as Speaker, that the Speaker controls a certain number of seats. Speaker controls the introductions that are made to the House. These are very important moments when a Speaker acknowledges people who are in the galleries. That is something that is the purview of the Speaker. And we applaud those people because we believe the Speaker has done the appropriate vetting to ensure that that person is worthy of the honor of the House of Commons applauding them. It didn't happen in this case, and it is a very egregious show of bad judgment. Tragically, you can think of the impact on the Jewish community to hear the fact that a Nazi, somebody who had fought with the SS in Ukraine, was being lauded, was being honored by the House of Commons. The incredible hurt that provokes. And so what we have here is a situation where the Speaker used his powers, but in a way that caused, I think, disrepute on the House of Commons and on Canada. And as a result of that, we believe he needs to take the appropriate take the appropriate step of stepping down as Speaker. The Bloc Québécois joined the NDP call this afternoon, so there are now 2 of the 4 recognized parties calling upon Speaker Rota to resign.
So clearly a focus on Speaker Rota. As you say, you are calling here for his resignation. But what do you make of Mr. Scheer's argument and the Conservative argument that the PMO, the Prime Minister, also needs to accept responsibility for what happened?
My understanding, since I've been here on the Hill, is that the Speaker has a wide prerogative and privilege in terms of who's introduced to the House. And that's why I think we were all aghast on Friday to learn the real identity of the person who was introduced to all members of Parliament in front of an international audience. I think Mr. Rota has justly taken that on, has apologized for it, but I don't think apology is sufficient. He needs to take the appropriate step. Given the magnitude of the fallout from this horrendous bad judgment, and needs to step down.
So, Mr. Scheer, if this is not a partisan issue by focusing on the Prime Minister, why not just join the NDP and Mr. Julian and call for the resignation of Anthony Rota and leave it at that? Or is this really just trying to choose a different target for political gain?
It's about recognizing who has the ultimate responsibility to ensure a successful state visit. And I just want to point out to my colleague, Peter, that this wasn't just like a regular Tuesday question period introduction. He's absolutely right. On normal sitting days, the Speaker can introduce guests to the gallery. And we do trust that there's a certain amount of vetting that goes on when we acknowledge a special guest in the gallery's presence. But this wasn't just a Tuesday or a Wednesday. This was an official state visit. When that happens, the PMO really does expand its influence in the House of Commons. And not just influence. The actual reporting structure for the House of Commons security forces include reporting to the RCMP and to the Minister of Public Safety. So that's the link. That's why this goes beyond just leaving it up to the Speaker to do due diligence. Lists were provided to the protocol department, and ultimately, eyes from the PMO, someone's eyes should have been on that list. What's the point of collecting names from MPs who are bringing guests in if those names aren't checked against who someone might be, against what they might have done in the past? And the standard for that elevates so drastically when we're talking about a foreign visit from a country under attack with a president who's going around the world trying to shore up support for his efforts to fight off an illegal invasion. So that's our point here, is that Justin Trudeau has to acknowledge the abandonment of responsibility that his government has over this matter. This cannot be swept away and throwing the Speaker under the bus to accept sole responsibility for this. Justin Trudeau has to answer for his role in this.
Okay, so the Prime Minister, as you are arguing here, has to have responsibility. Would you support the NDP motion? Will you support the NDP motion calling on Mr. Rota to resign?
Well, look, we'll see what the NDP formally propose in the coming days. But the point here is that what we don't want to see, this is what Justin Trudeau does all the time. When he's caught doing something or when his inactions cause harm, he likes to spread the blame around. So I have no doubt that the Liberals would love for Speaker Rota to take all the heat on this and to absolve themselves of any responsibility. But you cannot argue with the legislation that created the Parliamentary Precinct Service. You cannot argue with the reporting structure. It's there in black and white. They report up to the RCMP directly and then from there into the government. So that's what we're focusing on in the short term. We want to make sure that Justin Trudeau acknowledges his role in this shameful occurrence.
Okay, I am quickly losing time, but I want to ask one more question. I'm going to ask for quick answers here because we did hear the Government House Leader, Karina Gould, move today to have the Speaker's very complimentary remarks to Mr. Hunka struck from the record. Mr. Julian, I'm wondering where you stand on that. Mr. Scheer, I know you opposed it, but Peter, I'll get you to start us out, please.
I think it's difficult to put the toothpaste back in the tube. What happened on Friday was reprehensible. It needs to stand as part of the record. I do think addressing with the Jewish community to see the appropriate way of dealing with that in terms of Hansard is appropriate, but that's something that I think will only be clearer to us in the coming days.
Mr. Scheer, why did you oppose that motion?
Well, clearly the Liberals would like to whitewash this and erase it and pretend like it never happened, but it did. There was a reaction from around the world. Our trusted partners and allies looked at us with a great deal of puzzlement and outrage that this happened. So to try to, after the fact, pretend like it didn't happen, I don't believe it would be truthful and honest. I think the Speaker and the House and ultimately the Prime Minister have to acknowledge that something terrible happened. We can talk about how to address it going forward. We can talk about how to make up to the Jewish community here in Canada, what else we might like to do. But I don't think pretending like it never happened is a wise thing to do. That sounds very Soviet. It sounds like something that might happen in the Russian Parliament, where they try to just erase someone from history or pretend like something that was said was never said. But in our country, we should acknowledge when something happens, and then we can talk about how to right that wrong going forward.
Andrew Scheer, Peter Julian, really appreciate the time tonight. Thank you to both of you.
Thank you.